Yeah. We good? Okay. So the good thing about tonight's discussion around career planning is there isn't a lot specific to engineers as opposed to just managing people in general. There are a couple of things that are unique to managing engineers, but for the most part, we're just going to talk about why you want to do career planning with your employees. So a little bit of history for me. I've never had a manager really sit down with me and tell me where I stood, tell me where I was going, tell me where I was going to progress to. It's always been one of those things that I took and I just did. And as I got better at it for myself and I started managing people, I wanted to empower them to do the same thing I was doing, right? And as a manager, I wanted to know what their ideas were, because if I knew what their ideas were and their goals were, I could actually align them with things we wanted to get done as a company. Like, there's nothing worse than having someone on the wrong seat on the bus, and doing good career planning, make sure you have them on the right seat on the bus. Not everyone's going to be like a super go-getter, and so it's good to know how to manage, people in between, or even the people that are just starting out, especially out of school. It's always good to make a good impression with them.
Before you lose them.
Before you lose them, right? Somebody that can pay more and do better, right? Yep. So career planning, number one reason is to empower the employees to help themselves in their own career. And sometimes that takes them out of your company, and hopefully a lot of times it keeps them there and makes them more productive, right? Another good thing is by doing good career planning and giving good feedback, people are going to know where they stand, and people that know where they stand are more trusting, more open, and either contribute or they realize it's not for them and they move on, which is another benefit to the company at times, right? And as you do good career planning, you'll also get a good baseline for difficult conversations, right? When they want to move on to another something, when they just aren't working out, you're already going to have the data that you need to help them make a good decision. So, first point, empowering employees. We ask these questions all the time during interviews, and then once we get them on board, it's just kind of like, yeah, you're hired, you're working. I'm not going to ask you what you want to do in 2 months or 6 months or whatever. And we should be continually asking those questions. After the interview, you've only got them in the door and hired. You want to keep engaging them throughout their career, right? And the time they are at your company. So helping them answer those questions. What do you enjoy doing? What do you wish you could do more of? What do you wish you weren't doing? And make sure that they can get on the right track. And then make sure there's a framework that fits. I've got a couple different frameworks that I've used that I'll share. There's a couple I haven't used that I'm a little familiar with, but I haven't really used. I'd love to hear everybody else's opinions of what they have and haven't used. And a good thing, though, is don't do their planning for them. Otherwise, they're not going to engage. They're going to think you're just telling them what they have to do, and it's just another micromanagement thing. So make sure you get a framework that they invest in that's to the level of investment they want to spend, and it helps them build. Okay? So who's ever read the book Winning by Jack Welch? Anybody? You read it? A couple of you? Good. So chapter 3 in that book talks a lot about differentiation. And that is I'll talk a little bit about that. 9box is another tool that helps people know where they stand and where they are in their current role. Does anyone use 9box?
Is that the performance versus potential?
Initiative.
Yeah, initiative.
Initiative and potential.
Yeah. Are you going to show that one?
Yep, we'll talk about it. The ones in bold are the ones I really want to talk about, and I actually have slides, and I actually have some templates that I'm willing to share, and you guys can reuse them however you need to at your companies. You also want to make sure they know where they stand, because that helps them align to what you're expecting. Having a career path, and I'm going to talk about long-term and short-term, and the dangers of doing long-term over short-term, or vice versa. And if you've ever done 360 feedback, that can be a really, really good tool. I know Nick and I had some experience with that was like semi-good. When done well, 360 feedback can work really well, but it's very time-consuming and expensive, and if it doesn't work, you just spend a lot of money for nothing. So
you can outsource it. Did you guys do it yourselves, or did you have somebody else do it for you?
How did you do it? It was like a whole bunch of surveys.
It was outsourced. I mean, somebody else compiled all the stuff and administered
The downside is he didn't give us like the free text of what people like said.
He was really nervous about us knowing which
what?
particular people said which particular
Was it a
things.
small company? Is this where you were at before here?
Yeah.
Small company effect.
Yeah. And I don't know. I thought we were all grown-ups and it would have been fine.
Yeah.
But he was really worried about it, so.
I've seen people that are really good with getting negative feedback. They'll usually not care who it came from. They won't focus on that anyways. So it's almost worth giving it, and if they blow up, you can coach them out of that, because that's a problem they have anyways, right? I think it's important that people can take negative criticism in life.
Sometimes if the employees know that all comments will be shared, they hold back a little bit.
That's
And
true, too.
That's true.
But still, I'd rather have that than say, by the way, you can say anything because I'm the only one that's going to see it. Isn't this good?
Yeah. Okay. So we'll definitely talk about differentiation 9-box and then standard career pathing. So differentiation is the process to make or become different in the process of growth and development. And from the book Winning, it talks about winning leaders are going to invest where the payback is the highest. You know, you don't want to invest in your person you're going to cut next month a ton or that just isn't meeting potential, because you want the most payback for your investment. And that works at management level too, right? We only have a set amount of time. We're going to only be able to spend so much time with each person. We want to make sure you're maximizing that time investment. And one of the big comments of differentiation is if you search for it online, there's usually two polar opinions. It's great or it's horrible and it ruins everybody's lives. And so Google a few things around to learn, but Jack Welch really brings it down to it's basic playground rules. You know, if you're picking a team and you have two teams and you pick one by one to build up your team, like on the playground, like say you're playing soccer or baseball or kickball or whatever, you're going to pick the top 10%, then you're going to pick the mid-range guys, and then the bottom 10%, someone's going to eventually like, fine, you take him, right? So that's differentiation in a nutshell. So you're going to break it up into those categories, and then managers are acting differently based on what category that person's in, right? Your top 20%, you're going to shower them with whatever they need to. They're the people you definitely don't want to lose. Your 70% are the workhorses getting stuff done. You don't want to lose them either, and you want to grow them as much as you can. And with a bigger company, you can actually do what he says, which is cut your bottom 10% every so often. But when your market's really tight and there's not a lot of good recruits out there, I do not recommend cutting the bottom 10% every so often, because you're not going to have anybody that's not performing, hopefully. It's better to just get rid of them when you identify them.
So I think it's top grading, right, is the thing you're referring to. So can we talk about that for just a second?
Sure.
So nothing ticks off the top 20% than coddling the bottom 10%.
Yep.
And so to me, it almost came down to an ultimatum in a couple of places, right? They're like, I'm tired of having to clean up the crappy code or stay out late because of a bug escape or something like that because of Bobby Joe over there, right? And to me, that's when you know you have an issue. When the top 20% are saying, I'm getting tired of this, I think I'm going to go somewhere else because of the low performer. But I'm wondering if there's other circumstances where the Jack Welch top grading method is necessary, I guess, especially here in Utah, where it is. I mean, it's hard right now. It's really hard right now to recruit people.
So the bottom 10% to me, if I have somebody in the bottom 10%, I really try to identify if they're like progressing. And if they are, okay, I'll spend a little bit of time with them and help them progress. But if I have somebody that's clearly bottom 10%, close to cut, I'll start looking. And if I find somebody great, that's who will get replaced. But making sure the bottom 10%, that person, knows is also healthy, because then they can start looking already, which then everybody leaves on much better terms.
Right.
So, yeah, okay.
I like that. It's like notify them, by the way, you're cannon fodder.
Yeah.
You might want to go.
Well, you know, it's much more tactful than that.
Actually, had that happened here recently. We had one of our, there was a higher paid, he was an automation engineer, and it was a case of like, you know, you're not performing at the amount that we're paying you, and kind of giving them a little heads up, and then he quit. And that's officially how it will always be, is that he found a better job somewhere else. Wink, you know, like, and that's just better for everybody, really, so.
Yeah. So, how do we act differently based on where they're sitting? Is long-term career planning, knowing if they're going on a tech track, an operational track, or a managerial track in their career progression. A question I get often enough is, what is the difference between operational and managerial?
I was gonna ask you what the difference between operational and technical was.
Really? Okay.
Operational can be defined lots of ways.
Yeah, so the way I've defined it historically is technical is like the coders. They're going to stay architecty. They're going to stay very up on technology. They're much more engaged when they get to play with code all day. Operational would be more of a process based. They're like your scrum masters or your agile coaches. They're the people kind of making sure stuff's going through the system. And your managerial is the ones that like talking to people, finding people, recruiting, career development. That's how I break it up. A lot of times I've seen the operational and the managers like the same guy, right? Whereas your coder is going to be a coder because he can't stand people, right? Or he doesn't want to get involved, or you know, things like that. He'd much rather be code. So, role-based planning, making sure you have something that helps them in their current role and growing to the next role. I heard from one of my colleagues that U.S. business is very good at promoting the person to their first level of incompetence, right? If you haven't heard that.
Highest level of confidence.
Yeah. So making sure that people are growing into that, and making sure they get moved back when they weren't successful in a transition or something like that.
Are we going to talk about the, I don't know what to call it, safely moving between tracks? So finding a technical leader that wants to be a team lead and maybe a manager, and then saying, you know, that wasn't for me, I'm going to safely move back. Or have they gone and forevermore are they going to be a mediocre manager? Do you guys ever talk about that in career planning?
So
I think Nick, you talked about that. Or no, it was what was his name?
Ethan.
Ethan.
And I wish he was here, because he's actually doing that right now. He's transitioning back from managerial to technical. And so I wish he'd actually come, because he was supposed to come. But all I've ever done is always talked about how I think it's a good idea and it should exist on people's career ladders or whatever, and I've never actually seen it be a thing that happens.
of someone moving back.
Safely, or it's almost like, well, you're too late in your career to go to manager. You're a, I don't know if you guys have the level of like a consulting engineer, and I think I might like to be manager. Well, that's a step down in the career ladder to be an entry level manager, which is tough. So how do you make it safe for somebody to make that transition?
So 9box, if used correctly, can really help with that, because you'll try them out in the role before they actually get the title, or if they get to the title, it's easy to see them move to one side of the 9box and know that there's a trial involved there. So we will talk a little bit about that, and I'd love to hear ideas and whatnot. We've actually done it with one person in just a Workfront, where I got there and he had just become a manager, and in a couple months it was clear that people were like running from his team.
Yeah.
And so we had to transition him back, and I think we successfully did that. He's now a technical person and not a manager again.
Great.
So.
And a happy employee.
Yeah, and he's
Great.
Still a very high contributor.
That's great.
Surprisingly.
That's what you want.
You know, it's a success story of sorts, I suppose.
How big of a role do managers play in actually steering an employee in a direction, as far as which direction they want to go, and making sure they're going to be successful, right, and the right fit?
Anybody want to answer?
I think Jeff might agree. You guys go first.
I was just gonna say, like, I think it's important that more than anything, you make it a safe environment, I guess, and you give them options to do that. Because what's more common than anything is there's no way to move between the tracks, or it's a really harsh changeover that's really difficult. So I think it's really important that you continually ask them about it, really make it clear to them that it's a priority for you, that they have a plan and they want to grow, and then you provide the different tracks. I mean, I've seen way too many places where you're going to salary cap unless you become a manager, and I think that's the worst. Because then you end up with the worst managers.
Yeah, you got a manager managing people that wants to code all day and never does his one-on-ones and never. Yeah.
Or worse, right?
Yeah.
Or does damage.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that we're in a little bit of a different world because we're in recruiting, but we're really a sales organization. It's a little bit different than software development, but career development for people is career development. And in our company, we've had many people who have gone, our traditional career path is recruiter, sales, and then sales director or sales manager. And we've had many people who have stepped into a sales manager role or sales director role and have done it for a year or two and haven't been great at it, and really other people should be in that role and have been put into a different position, and maybe it is a little bit of demotion. But the key in our culture that makes it okay and that I think works out long term is we have a culture of open feedback, and conflict is welcome. So it's people are very honest about where your strengths and weaknesses are, and we have managers and directors who will say, I don't see you in this role because I don't see your strengths are there, but I do see you in this role and I think you're better suited for it. So I don't know if that's helpful, but it's something that's helped in our company. So.
Okay. I think I talked a little bit about 9box. Career planning. So I actually did a long-term career plan recently with somebody, and it was a very open discussion, but there was some risks that I didn't realize I was causing because he was a lot more open than I thought he would be. And so I actually suggest doing a smaller career plan. It's a much smaller scope, especially with early on employees and things of that nature. And I'll talk a little bit about the differences. So long-term planning. Let me
I want to
tell
hear
you.
that story now that you said.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll tell you.
But you can't just
I can't leave it.
tee something like that up and just walk away from it.
Yeah, I'll show you. So let me show you some of these tools that I got here. So long-term career plan. So is it big enough, or can I zoom in? Is that good?
Yep.
All right. So the big thing with a long-term career plan is you're trying to talk. What do you want to be in 5 years at said company? And in a tech org, this can actually be kind of dangerous because, like you said earlier, people only stay in a tech company a couple of years. 3's like a long time. So setting a 5-year goal at your same company often turns into a lie, right? Or or what they tell you what they think you want to hear. So what I actually did is I did the long-term career path with someone that had just started. He wanted a career path in the company, and his 1-year target was to be really, really good at his current job, and his 2-year target was I want out of the org and I want to go do this over here in sales, and then my 5-year goal is I'm going to be a VP of something over in this other org, right? And to me, I was like, okay, well that's good. But I instantly put him in the middle pile, right? Because he's going to manage himself now, and he's not one of my 20%. He's not going to stay in my org. And we ended up doing a stack ranking of sorts. Who's ever done stack ranking, right? So the top person, if he's mentioned by a lot of people, gets a lot of kudos and maybe some bonus or something like that. And if somebody at the bottom gets named, that they're at the bottom, instantly they kind of get the red mark of they're not producing. Well, this guy was new. He's still in his first 6 months at the company, and we do this process and get it opened up. Well, I put him lower down on my list because he's a short-term employee as far as I'm concerned, right? But I present this to everybody else, and instantly they think he's a bad hire, right? Where he really isn't a bad hire. I think he's probably going to do really good at learning our software and our tool, and when he moves into his next step, it's going to make him that much better and help the org as a whole. But just based on how I would have to pick my guys, I put them much lower because I did a long-term career plan. So that's the danger of doing a long-term career plan, is you might hear something that doesn't align with like, he's gonna be working for you forever and be really good at it. And that can scare people. So, and then everybody's heard of a BHAG goal, right? That's, if you were in your career, where do you want to be at some point, regardless of the company, what do you want to do in life, right? So, has anyone done a SWOT analysis and is familiar with this little chart over here? So, I won't go into that too much. I made a little link here. But the idea is get their strengths, get their weaknesses in their current role, find out what opportunities they want to take, and what threats at them either doing their job or promoting out or things of that nature, right? And then over here on skills to develop, I just filled this in with some basic things, but hopefully every one of your companies has what you look for in a hire and what you look for in an employee, and that's what those skills are, right? So you'll see in my shorter career plan over here, I base this a lot more towards Joel on Software's Guerrilla Guide to Hiring. Get a smart guy, get a guy that can get things done, and then make sure he isn't a jerk to your team, right? Make sure he's a good culture fit. But we'll talk about the shorter term one here in a minute. So this is like the long-term career plan. This is something that I would suggest you provide to everybody, and they can kind of do it on their own, but rather use your short term in your coaching conversations that you have.
Do you feel like this is something that has to come down at an organization level? I mean, I'm one of 3 managers in my dev organization, or one of 4 really. And, I mean, could I roll this out to my team of 7 engineers, or am I stupid and I should roll it out across the whole organization?
I think the higher it goes, the better off it is. But there's nothing, I don't see anything negative towards you rolling it out to even one individual.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So,
How formal do you make it? I mean, is it like in the record, or do they have a copy of it? I mean,
yeah.
I've had weird issues with that in the past.
So earlier I mentioned make sure they're the ones doing it. So I'll actually give them a copy of this, and it's their job to fill it out, and it's their job to own it, and it's in their Google accounts. And so I keep it out of HR. Me personally. If HR comes down with the process from on high and says thou shalt,
Yeah.
I'll do that. But a lot of times if I don't have one of those, I'll do this. At least get something to help them with career pathing.
I think you have to be careful of the environment with your peers.
Right.
I mean, if you start doing something that differentiates you from them, they're gonna what's Nick doing, or what's Jeff doing there? Do you know about this, boss? And so I think it's, before you roll it out, just your team saying, hey, here's something that I'm gonna try with my team.
Right.
Let me see how it goes, I'll share the results with you guys. And
I think that's the right answer. I know my boss in particular we're a pretty young org. It's sort of like he's fine with those ideas, and okay, you guys go try this on your team, and if it works, then we'll talk about rolling it out somewhere else. So that's probably the right.
It's something you want to tell your peers, though. Like this career growth ladder and whatnot, everyone at my level knows about it.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're using it with their own people is their choice.
Right.
But they know that I'm doing it. So I mentioned this a little bit. The advantages of long term is you're having them answer the questions, are they in the right job? And are they even in the right company? You're going to get the right answers there. Or they're going to see the right answers, which will help them be more engaged.
So I think there's a lot of value to a long-term plan for an employee, and I think there's almost zero value to a long-term plan for a company. So how do you reconcile that? Are you just like, I'm a nice guy, I don't want to help out my... Because you have problems like what you had, or, we're really, it's like, my wife her long-term plan is to be, like a CEO. That's her, 15-year roadmap. And she's been really honest with that, but part of that is basically telling the company that my time here is limited because at some point I'm going to have to leave so I can go be a VP, so then later I can be a C-level. And do you run into issues like you had? I mean, I don't know. I wonder if it's even worthwhile to do that because, I don't know.
So, long term, I got bit, right?
Yeah.
What I'm actually going to do is if somebody's very interested in a short term plan, I will show them the long-term plan and say, go ahead and do this on your own. But surprisingly, it built a lot of trust with that individual. And even though he ended up like low on the stack ranking and I had that conversation with him, I gained a lot of trust right there because he knew, oh, that's what happened. You're being open with me. And it really helped me make sure he was open with me as he looked. So, for instance, he already started researching the next step, right? He wants to go into project management or product management, be a product owner, even though he's a developer right now, right? And so he's now very open with me on, well, there's another posting, I'm gonna apply, is that okay? And I'm like, yeah, it's good to be aware of that, keep my options open, things like that. So it had its negative, like initially, but it was good for me because now he's much more open with me. And he knows I still didn't I didn't throw him under the bus or anything.
Right.
He still knows where he stands in his job. He knows will contribute really well at your current role. You're still going to get a good recommendation from me as long as you're doing X, Y, Z based on what we discussed. And as he says, well, I want to focus on doing some additional career development on my own or books I'm reading. I'm no longer saying, well, what are you doing to get better at programming, right? I don't have to waste the time talking to him about that because that's not a super interest. So it's more about what are you doing now and contributing, are you doing well with your team, and talking with his peers about is he still pulling his weight, and less about me saying, well, you need to get smarter and smarter, be more and more technical. Instead, I can lay off that now.
In my experience, I'm just thinking back over the years, 20 years in the industry, and what I hope to continue to do, because it's always hard to do the right thing, is simply get a sense, is this person one of those ambitious folks? And then say, okay, I know you're ambitious, you keep asking me what it's gonna take and all this, where do you wanna go? And I've only had one person say, I wanna be a CEO, and he's a CEO now, and I was part of that. But everybody else I always force the conversation, what is your next step?
Yeah.
Just so that they know that I've got their back and that we're going to work together on that next step. But I've never, other than Ken, that one guy, where I sensed this outrageous ambition, never wanted to force the long-term discussion because it does put them in a vulnerable space. Whether I'm going to support them in that long-term goal or not is a question for both of us, honestly. Like, well, actually, you're adult. You're not going to make it past this,
Right.
or them saying, yeah, I'm going to be your boss in a couple of years, or something. And so I like to just focus on what's your next step, and then if I sense the ambition, then go ahead and have that. So anyway.
Yep. So that leads me straight to the shorter term planning, and this is the one I recommend a lot higher. Focusing on your current role and only your next step, right? You're still using the SWOT analysis, and you're still aligning them with the skills and the company values. And again, the disadvantage is they have to fill it all out, right? So kicking into here, right?
They have to do something.
They have to do something, and there's still that discussion. So you'll see in this career plan, it's a little bit lighter in that you're saying, well, what's your current role? What you're asking them what they think success in their role is, and you're helping them define what success is in their role. So let's say they're a Java developer that ended up on your DevOps team or something like that, right? Well, as a DevOps guy, even though this isn't your full stop, this is success while you're here, and now let's talk about success in your next role, right? So then you can set up goals that are much shorter lived, 6 months to a year based, and you're still focusing on the long-term development of those individuals, but you're not focused on when are they going to get the heck out of the company because they're sick of being in DevOps. Instead, they can see, oh, I can get out of, I'll leave DevOps if I'm successful and move on to something else, in those roles. That's kind of an extreme example. Most of the time you'll have like a software engineer level 2, right? It's out of school. Well, the next step is a level 3. Well, what are you going to do to become a level 3, right?
Yeah.
And
Or they want to get on the UI dev team, not on the
Yeah.
back end, or vice versa, or something like that.
So maybe we're still gonna talk about this, but what do you do with the guy who's at the top of his growth?
okay,
Is that coming at later on, or? do you-
yeah, it's coming in $9.
Can we talk? Okay.
Yeah, let's skip to that.
I'll wait.
Let's skip there, because $9, these are like good at setting like they can make it, right? But there's never like the moment where you say, well, you're kind of just, you're like top down,
Yeah.
right?
Can I ask a question on this, because it reminded me of something we did in Contact about a year ago, in that we tried to differentiate between the person's career level, do you know what I mean, like SE1, SE2, SE3, senior, etc., and the role that they were currently playing. So as an example, I could be an SE2 playing the role of team lead on my team, and then maybe I'll be a senior engineer and I'll be playing the role on an architecture team or things like that. Have you guys played with that with regard to career laddering, or do you even do that at your companies? Or you try to differentiate between role and level?
Yes. We haven't been super successful yet. I'm still trying to figure it out, to be honest. So we have an architecture group that's separate from our product groups,
Yeah.
right, that are defining architecture at a high level.
Yep.
And one of the things we have is we only wanted principal engineers to be on the architecture team,
Yeah.
right? And so anybody that's a senior engineer that wants to be a PE needs to move on into architecture and then leave product. And
Yeah, they move. They
Right?
have to leave your
And
team.
they gotta leave your
That's what
team.
sucks, right? You
So,
never want to lose them.
What we
Right.
tried to do differently with ours to help that problem, to get PEs on product groups, was help them see they would still be doing architectural role, except at a product level.
Yeah.
So instead of having to go to the architecture team for those sort of things, they became principal technical resources on the team, and we were able to give them the right title there. So they weren't necessarily playing with, we're gonna refactor this whole thing into be, you know, Spring Boot or Spring XD or, you know, things like that. Instead, they're now doing architecture work at a microservice layer on our product groups, and then getting it reviewed by architecture, so they still have all that interaction they wanted,
Yeah.
and they're still doing the technical work on a production line type environment.
Are you showing that up in their career path? Because that's a big issue for people, right?
Yeah.
You, as a manager, you don't necessarily want to have to move them from your organization in order for their career to move on, but you want to give them a role that allows their career to grow.
Yeah. So, as far as making it an official, all PEs go here and some PEs go there, or, you know, title switching, what we have done is, I don't have those docs on me.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a way to explain that off using our org chart at Workfront. We actually have a little thing at the bottom that says technical resource, and that's where we put the PTR.
They still all report to Steve though, right? I mean, everybody's under the CTO and,
In this case, they report to me as their direct manager, but they're on a product group, and I report through Jesse, who's our director of product,
yeah, I know Jesse.
and then he reports to Steve.
But they move out of Jesse's team too, right?
No, they're still reporting to me.
No, I mean the people that are on your architecture team.
Yes. Architects are reporting to Glenn. Sorry, lots of names. Maybe no Glenn, but
Glenn.
that guy.
But that's the challenge, and they
But I
feel like,
didn't have to
you
move
need
him
to
out.
go, you need to build a relationship with Glenn. You ought to go have a one-on-one with him about career pathing.
And see, I didn't have to do that. So I have a PE that's on my product group right now that's doing that sort of service design and whatnot. And he's still reporting to me as opposed to the architecture team.
Okay.
We're trialing it
Yeah.
because Steve's always been very wary of that.
And what about here at Vivint?
Well, so what I was gonna say, as far as the roles versus titles, the way I've tried to do it, or I've seen it tried to be done, is usually where you're trying somebody out. So even though somebody's a level 2, you know, they want to be a level 3, and the level 3 is now gone, and so you kind of like, okay, you're the acting level 3, even though you're a level 2, and then or you're the acting lead, even though
Yeah,
you're
the
really
team leader
or
and stuff,
something else. And the main issue I've had with it is it's not like this really official thing. And so they want to be able to put on their resume that they were like a team lead or, you know, an official like something or another, and they weren't. And I've never had a good way to like how do you reconcile that thing that you did where I was trying you out?
We gave them both.
Yeah.
We said you can always put on your email tagline or whatever your career level, and you can also put what your role is. So they have I'm an SE2 team lead. I'm an SE senior product architect, or I'm SE senior platform architect.
I like that.
And let them do both.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And the role titles, we let them vary them as appropriate. It's like Queen Diva.
Yeah. SE4.
Right.
Yeah. So, so there's shorter term planning. I think I only have one more slide anyways. Yeah, this is the last one. So 9-box analysis. So this one's going to focus on the now, but as opposed to doing like a SWOT analysis and a tech analysis or a skill analysis, you're actually going to put them in a box. And I'll talk about all the boxes here. The good news is once you define the boxes, it's really easy to put someone in a box. So it's very lightweight once you get it all set up at a manager level. And based on how you're prioritizing your company growth, different boxes will be of more value, and I'll talk about that as well. And based on where they put themselves in the boxes and where you put them in the boxes, you now have the discussion of why there's a disagreement, right? And you can level as a manager to your employees. The only disadvantage of this is the potential axis tends to be extremely subjective unless you define it really well.
Does performance not become subjective as well? Or do you feel like that's easier to?
That one's easier to track. You should have metrics that say they're finishing stories or they're finishing.
We talk about metrics in the pitch.
What? Metrics? Usually, that one's a little easier because your team, the whole team can usually see that guy's getting a lot of crap done and he always helps me with my code reviews and he's always, it's a lot easier for more people to see that. When you talk the potential curve though,
Yeah, no, you're right.
yeah, people get all up in arms there. So let me show you the definition. And there's a lot of text on here, so I'll try and maybe I'll use a whiteboard and trim it down. But if not, here we go. We'll see how it goes.
I already pointed the camera at the TV, so.
Yeah, and we don't want to move the camera.
Yeah.
So just look at the bold. So the idea is you've got 9 boxes, and they have the potential axis, which is the y-axis, right? And if I don't scroll really far, you have your performance across the bottom. And I've got a couple links in here that talk about basics of 9-box and then EQ. Everyone know what EQ is? That's emotional quotient.
Okay.
Right? So as you're putting people in here, there's different shades of boxes. You'll note these are light yellow. This is big yellow. You've got some red and kind of some pinkish down here. These are actually white and these are gray. And the reason for this is gray boxes are where people usually go when they are just put into a role. So they're new hires. They've just transitioned from being a contributor to being a lead. Things like that reset where they sit in the box. Because mainly you're now tracking them on how they're performing relative to their role. So all of this is role-based. You can have somebody that's been over in this box forever, they get a promotion and they should go back to this box or this box up here. Okay? Has anybody used 9-box at all? How much detail should they get?
We just did it here, but I wasn't unfortunately part of it. I was told where all of my guys were categorized.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So,
and I more or less agreed with them all, but still.
Okay.
I didn't know it was called 9-boxing, but yeah, absolutely
Okay.
the dual axis thing, for sure.
Okay. So the good thing about 9-boxing is there's only one box that you don't want to be in. And it's this bottom one, the 1-1 box. And that's because they're underperforming, they're not meeting their current role, they're on the wrong seat on the bus, they're just not performing. They're unlikely to be successful in other roles, potentially. You've tried them in other roles, and they're just not working. They're the people you put on usually an HR-defined improvement plan. So you don't want to be in that box. 1-1, bad box. So the others, though, each have their value. So one of the risks that you run when implementing 9-box is lots of people want to throw the best performers up here, even though they're not meeting all criteria. So I'll kind of go through each one of the boxes. So solid professional, they're the people that they have the ability to learn technologies, but you usually have to direct them. They're likely to stay there because they're not really self-motivated to get out. They're the ones that aren't speaking up in discussions and decisions in their role. They're just kind of doing what they're asked. And they're unlikely to take on additional roles because they just want to get back to coding or back to whatever they were doing, right?
Their comfort zone.
This is comfort zone box, right? They're still giving you solid performance. You just don't see a lot of initiative and potential in them with their current behaviors. And this box becomes a risky box because if you've got someone that's coding that never reads a technical book for 2 years, you might as well throw them away. I mean, they're going to be out of date in no time. So you've almost always got to push.
You put them on your sustaining team.
Yeah,
Maybe
maybe that's a good place to put them, right? So they're not going to be the ones that stay up to speed all the time, right? So the next box, and these aren't necessarily in order, I'm just kind of going off the bottom line first. So these are high professionals, right? They're the ones that you ask them to do something and it gets done. And they're very fast at their job, they're very technical. They've usually been at the company a while, so they like know everything and everybody goes to them for technical details. They have a high level of domain expertise, but they just don't ever get out of their comfort zone.
I have a guy like that on my team.
Yep.
He is fantastic. I can give him anything, it will get done. He is never going to be above the level he is now. Like, I just don't believe that ever. Yeah. And then I'm like, in my mind, that's okay. You know, he's one of our higher, level 3 or 4, or whatever their track is compared to other people's. It's a high one, but not like the highest one. He's never going to be an architect. He doesn't have that kind of mindset. But like you say, here's a thing, and he builds it. And is that okay? Is that good enough? I mean, I like to convince myself it is, but.
Yeah.
The question is he okay with that? Does he see himself that way? Or does he see himself?
And maybe that's the right question to be asking, right?
Yeah, I'm just curious if someone like that says, this is what I'm good at, and I'm comfortable, and I'm just fine being here for a long time.
I mean, I've never had that real formally of a conversation with him, but it's sort of like, what do you want to be doing? He's like, oh, this is good, that's kind of.
It's dangerous depending on the company that you're in, and that what if that individual feels threatened or something like that.
Right.
It could be, but frankly, I'd love to staff a company with people like that.
And quite honestly, like the issue I had, and it's a good issue to have, but I have 7 people on my team, and all 7 of them fell in that right column. And they were at different levels of the right column. But it's like, you talk about a bottom 20 or even a middle 70, I don't have that. And it's a fantastic problem to have again, but like, sometimes you lose some of the, the options that you get.
Yeah, right. So yeah, and this box is good. You want to have 1, 2, depends on how big your team is, but you want somebody here. It's the guy that, when the rubber hits the road, he just gets it done. So, and yeah, I have a couple of them. So the next line up, so this is where I'm going to skip this gray box and just stay on solid performance. So the difference between a key player and a solid professional is they're interested in and proactive in solving their problems, so they're no longer being directed to find all their problems, right, or do their job. They're learning new technologies and skills kind of on their own time. They're making sure they're staying up to date. They're capable and willing to take on new responsibilities. They're a good cultural fit, and they're working for the success of their team. They're now branching out from their job and kind of helping in a team dynamic, which is extremely useful in an agile environment, right? And they're also realizing the company vision. So there's your key players. Now, which one do you want more, right? A high professional or a key player? And that's dependent on your company size, your growth curve, I think, and where you're sitting, right? Do you want more opportunities to get leaders? Because you're not going to grow them down here. They have a hard time being leaders. So current stars, they're, again, producing a lot. They have high productivity. They're now ready now to take on more role. In fact, they're above average in learning new technologies, and they're actively learning them. They're also looking at partnerships and how to form better teams, even cross teams. they're no longer just super high performing on their own team. They're top of their game with room to grow in those aspects. They're starting to show they're an emerging leader, right? And that you see that based on who they're interacting with and how they solve their problems beyond themselves. And they're now challenging the current ways to do things, trying to find more productive ways to do it. And they're working at helping other people get better at their role, okay? Next one up is over here, the future star. So these are the guys that have a high breadth of experience, and they're starting to do roles that aren't even their job. They're still producing their current job great, right? They're solid performance, but they're not the ones that are doing their job times 5. Instead, they take their extra time and they start helping other people that aren't doing their job well, or even branching out into other roles. So they have a high potential with a track record of executing. They're always going to get their stuff done that they've agreed to. They're learning new technologies, but they have a strong desire to get into another role or help other people with different roles that are different than their current role. And they're proactively trying to find and contribute to team problems that are outside of their current responsibility, okay? And they're very good with emotional quotient because they're good in discussions, decisions, and motivating other people. And that's what they do instead of doing their own job like a ton, right? So these boxes, when I explain 9 box to people, these 2 boxes are like the hardest because they seem like the same thing, but the difference is when they overperform, where do they overperform? Yeah. In their own current role or in their own like tech stack, or are they the ones that are like, man, if I could just help so-and-so and this smooth out and those sort of things.
I've seen those guys before where they're like, man, this guy's so smart. Why doesn't he get more done?
And he's off doing that sort of stuff, trying to solve process and things like that.
Right.
So you can already see your tech guys are probably going to be your current stars a lot more, where they're going to want to try out management, whereas the other guys are like, man, I can't wait to get into management, right? Because that's what they're more interested in. They're more interested in the process and the people than they are over committing or committing more stuff.
Getting more stories done.
Yep. And then your consistent star, these are like the guys you never want to lose, right? They're the ones that no matter where you put them, they not only help everyone around them, but they're also getting more done than they should be, right? So you shouldn't have a ton of people in this box, but yeah.
Is it a problem if you do?
Nope. Right? It just means you might as well re-level the curve, right?
Yeah. Well, so we actually had this problem in our organization on the 5th floor where we did a kind of like HR mandated evaluation, and we were told that we had evaluated way too many people at exceeds expectations.
Yeah.
And we're like, but they are. Like, they're better than everybody else. Like
In the company.
Yeah. Or in other companies.
True.
And so then we had to have this whole calibration thing where we did this and some of this layout stuff, and I'm just like, but they're good.
Yeah.
Can I ask just one question, Jeff, in this regard? I could put my whole team onto one of these charts because it kind of, you expect principal engineers to be kind of either the good coaching principal engineer that coaches and betters the whole team, or the principal engineer that just gets crap done right and nails it. And then you'll see some SE2s and seniors peppered throughout. Is that the intent of this, or do you really want to have a 9 box for SE2s and a 9 box for seniors and a 9 box for principals? What's the intent, do you think?
So I think it works best when you have it per role, because then you can say, as a level 2, this guy is cranking stuff out. So you make him a level 3, and now he's over here in this box, right? And so as a level 3, you're going to expect more out of him, which when he starts performing that, maybe he does right away, because he was already performing level 3, then he goes into key player. He's performing correctly as a level 3. So your level 3 should always be outperforming your 2s, right? Just based off level. So that doesn't mean you put all your 3s at overperforming, right?
Right.
Because it's actually your level 3s, how are they performing relative to each other?
Right.
and also in their own role, right, as an individual.
Some of the character, I bring that up because some of the characteristics that you have, for example, up on, go up one more.
Oh, sorry,
level.
up here.
Emotional quotient in discussions, decisions, and roles.
Mhm.
I expect that of higher level engineers, but SE1s and SE2s, I still expect them to say embarrassing, inappropriate things in meetings periodically, right? Because they just haven't been around long to know not to say that. And so I might take that off of the SE2s realm, because SE2s, I just want them to get stuff done and be a good team player. Is that the suggestion? Am I hearing?
So, what I would think is, as a level 2, are they showing more EQ than they would normally as a level 2?
Yeah.
Right? Whereas, you expect that from a principal to begin with. So, are they really good at EQ? Well, then they're a key player.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And if it's a principal
Yeah, there
who
you
only
go.
speaks up, 30% of the time compared to the other principals who speak up, 95% of the time, but really an SE2 only speaks up 2% of the time,
Right.
So,
Or is texting during the
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
I have seen this work well when you put it together with per role.
Great level.
And
That's a great
expectations
level
there.
expectation.
Because then it also lets you know when they're promotable,
Yeah.
right? So if you've got a level 2 that's been riding over here for like 6-7 months, that's when you start saying, okay, well, we're ready to start putting you into a 3, and that's different because of X, Y, Z. So I didn't mention these over here. So these are like the people you just find, or the people that have moved from new roles. So let's say they were a 3-3 as a level 3, and you made them a team lead. Well, you expect them to be like this rough diamond, right? You're expecting them to be amazing as a team lead, because that's where they came from. And over the next 6 months, you're going to be evaluating them. And when I originally got like the 9 box, it said like 1 year, and I'm like, dude, that's like way too long. Like I'd almost trim it to like 3 months,
yeah.
right? We tried to make a nice in between with 6 months over at ours, but
People are doing stuff.
yeah. I expect it to be a 3-monthly thing. I should very well evaluate them at 90
Depending
days.
on what the
whether
role
or not
is, I would expect something within a month or even a couple of weeks.
Right.
Now, we've even switched to 60-day, like HR, you're a new hire, 60 days,
Yeah.
you're doing well now, or you're not.
Mhm.
Different discussion, right? So the good thing about this box is, so say you have a solid professional, right? You can now have the conversation of, well, you put yourself in key player, I put you in solid professional. That is because I need to see X, Y, Z behavior out of you. And then you can talk more about the behaviors that you would like to see them improve on, which is kind of part of that skills off the short-term, career plan. But this just makes it a little easier to say, oh, I'm in this box, I can move that way, or I could move that way, or I could move the wrong way. But you can now have those discussions, right?
Do you have the individual put themselves
I do.
in a box?
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Yep.
And
It always
then-
makes it rough. I mean,
Right.
we actually have the upper right box is called Rockstar, and I tell people just initially, never declare yourself a rock star.
Well, and
Not
They also,
even
they
the rock
usually
star
also
industry
demand
is
30-inch
and
monitors.
I've worked with plenty of people who I think would rate themselves higher than they are, but like I've got probably 3 people on my team right now who I know based on our year-end evaluations would consistently rate themselves lower than they are. They're like, oh, I'm really just a solid professional. I'm like, no, you're not.
Well, I love to have those conversations. Is the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah. The worst conversation is when they put themselves in the 3-3 box.
And
And you're like, you're like this guy over here. Everybody likes you and everybody talks to you.
yeah.
But I try to ask you to do
Yeah.
this to help this team member, and you complain that you're not getting the work done.
Right.
Right? That's the hardest one.
Well, that's interesting. I really want to do it now.
So the question was asked a while ago, and now we'll get back to it. So what do you do with someone that is currently at their level? And what do you do with them, right? So this is the harder discussion, because let's say we have a solid professional, and they have been given opportunities to branch out and do more, and they just keep failing at it, right? So hopefully as a manager, you're giving them the opportunities to get them to where they think they could be, and then you have an exact example of, well, you didn't make it because of this. And that makes it a little easier to say your growth is tapping out.
So, and I guess I look at this as, so my brother works at Google, and we were talking about their kind of career ladders, and the thing that they do is they have like, you know, level 1 through, and it's like salary tiers or something. It's like 1 through, you know, probably a million at the top. I don't know, but you know, like so. But their expectation is they'll hire somebody in at usually a 1 to a 3. But the expectation is that everyone will get to like a 5. I think I'm making these numbers up, but it's something like that. And they actually tell people and set the expectation that if you don't get to a 5 within X years, you're not growing like you're supposed to. But then there's an expectation that it's perfectly okay once you get to 5 that that's the top. You know, that is kind of like their, you know, senior engineer, and you're a high, you know, you're a high professional, and that's a great spot to be. You make a lot of code, you're smart, everything's great, but you're not, you know, you're not just destined for the architecture track. You're not destined for, you know, director or manager, and that's fine. And I like that idea because in my mind, you know, somebody who caps out at an S1 or an S2. Garbage, you know, like that's not an okay place to cap out. But you know, I think it's not. I don't think everyone should be an architect. I don't think everyone should be a manager someday. I don't think people are cut out for that.
Right.
There's no reason you can't be a senior engineer forever. And
some people are happier there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? Yeah. You know, like that's not your skill set. You don't enjoy it, but I just want to put on my headphones and I want to make out and I want to pump out a lot of code, and they can do that. They can do that forever, and they're fantastic at it.
I think the two things that come up in that regard is that everybody will say, yes, I'd like to make more money, right? And that's where you go, oh crap, you know, that's not gonna happen for you, buddy. And the other one is where the expectation gap about career and influence level is so, you know, they get to a level of frustration saying, these guys on the architecture team, because we've got the same thing at platform team and contact, right? I want to have influence there, and I don't want to be outside the circle, I guess, in those things. And even though I'm with you, Nick, that some people, you know, day in and day out, engineer, you're happy in your job. You love your job.
Yeah.
But you'd like to make $10,000 more or whatever. You'd like to get more options or something. Or you'd like to have more influence. And that's always a tough conversation. Because that could make them a phone call away of getting recruited out. Right. And somebody that doesn't know the whole story but wants it to come out. But anyway, I'm ranting.
No, I've seen the same problem. So we've got a high professional, right, that wants to make more and more money. But he's in the role he's at, and he's had a couple opportunities to branch out. He scared off like 2 employees when he tried to mentor him. You know, they came in, they didn't last, they left. Reason was X person didn't mentor me very well. Things like that, right? And, but yeah, he wants more money. The other downside that happened is they worked their way across this chart and through promotions. Every time they went from like up here, right, they're SE 2 or 1 or whatever, and they become a 2, they get like a 7% raise, right? And then they get a 10% raise, and then they get an 8% raise, and now all of a sudden you're in this box and it's like 1.5.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like because you're in the role that you're at and you're no longer like superstar growing.
Yeah.
And that's a struggle I don't know how to reconcile yet.
I don't think you do, honestly. I honestly don't think you do, and I think you need to have the conversation with them and say, you know, if you really do want to make more money, if you really are destined for something else, like, you need to show it. I mean, and you have to have that conversation of, the way you make more money is being farther up this, you know, chart, and you're not. Because, you know,
Maybe we talked about it last month when you were talking salaries, but like, there's that guy, like, I never want to see what I call the Arby's rule. I related to fast food because I was in fast food as a teenager. And it's called Arby's rule because that's where I worked. But the concept was like, I got like hired as like their like shift manager, and I started at a salary that was more per hour than someone who had been there 5 years because their growth curve was such crap that it was better to get fired and rehired. You'd be on a higher growth, right? So as long as you've got that guy down there that like you're hiring those people and you're bringing them in at like 20,000 more than that guy, you should fix that.
Yeah, that's broken. I mean, so I mean, my guy like that's like this is, you know, he's the second or third highest paid guy on my team, and he's, you know, he makes plenty of money. He's gonna get reasonable raises, and I think he's gonna be fine there forever. But you know, I could definitely see that with a different kind of person who really thinks he's destined for magical greatness, and
some of it's the expectation, and I think the reality, like the SE2s, unless they are, I don't know how you 9-box SE2s, but because if there is an expectation gap for those folks between, you know, where they see themselves or you see them, and you're trying to be honest, they are a phone call away from jumping. And so sometimes you find yourself, at least, okay, I find myself and my managers will find themselves saying, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. But I don't know, I'm speaking openly and honestly to you guys, but
I mean, I've seen it. We happened at Spillman. We lost an SE2 because he was convinced that he should have been an SE3, and we're like, I don't know. and he failed.
Yeah, or his model, he's
you know,
to be a little up.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and so and he got another offer, and it was, you know, a full like, you know, SE3 salary, and we're like, oh, see you later.
Yeah.
I don't know how you fix that sometimes, but
The downside that I've seen is if you're like, fine, you can be at SE3, when you find another SE3 and they come to work with that guy, now you've like poisoned your culture, and it sucks.
I'm such a big proponent of not having poison of any kind, and I'll go out of my way to not hire poison, and I'll go out of my way to get rid of poison, and you know, I like everyone to look around them and say that guy's as good or better than me. And if I don't know.
Let me give you the example, if this helps. Got a guy, Isaac, came out of, he had a little bit of school, 2 years of computer science school, and then was really good, so we went full time in our implementations team in contact. So he's writing code for customers, right? Really good, knows the product, so we bring him in as an SE1 in engineering, and he's tearing it up. The guy is tearing it up. So we promote him to SE2, and which all seems reasonable at that point. So he's 4 years into his career, really 3 years in the engineering team, and his stock price is really high, to use that metaphor. If you look at the 9-boxing and things, he's not a senior engineer, you know, or I think an SE3, what you guys, because he's 3 years into his career. He hasn't done a lot of things, but he's highly respected because he gets a lot of crap done. So he comes in the review cycle and says, you know, I'd like to become a senior engineer. And so we put a tag by him, and 6 months later, what do? Do you say, well, you know, Isaac's tearing it up, has a lot of respect, but it doesn't meet the requirements, really. But other than that, I mean, he could jump ship. Do you give him the benefit of the doubt and promote him? Or even though in reality he's probably, you know,
Up here somewhere.
yeah, he's probably up there, or maybe at the solid professional or something like that.
Are you worried about the message it sends the rest of your team?
That's right.
Because being in recruiting, I have a hiring manager. She was actually going to come tonight. She couldn't make it, but she manages a software development team for a company downtown. And she consistently will make offers to guys based on their ability, not on their years of experience, and what it says to the rest of the team. She took a guy who was 2 years in, who was doing just as good as her 5-year engineers, and made him the same salary offer. So far as it hasn't had a negative effect on her team, but she consistently does that because she believes in it.
Yeah.
Pay on your ability, not on your
That's
tenure or your experience.
Right, and even if that demonstrated ability is only over a 6-month period of time,
Yep.
like in the case of Isaac.
Yeah.
And he went from making 65 to 105 within a year.
Wow, right.
But she did that because she knew it was worth that on the market.
See, and we talked about this in our salary conversation, and it's the same issue that you have with that mid-range, is people feel like, you know, oh, I'm this top guy, and you may want to make this jump, but at the same time, you know, I very strongly believe that experience does not equal, whatever the word we just
Increased
use
value.
necessarily increased value. But I do believe that there is some increased value that comes from experience.
Sure.
Like a guy with 10 years of experience he's been through more, hard knocks. He's been in the trenches. He's made the deployments. He knows the types of things that can go wrong. He's been to the conferences and knows the types of things to type into Google. I mean, there's something to be said for that, right? I mean, it's true. It really is. And so it's like I've passed up on people with 2 or 3 years who, in their mind, were already senior, and I'm just like, but you're not. And it's like, but somebody else was making them a senior offer, and I'm like, okay. And I don't know. It's hard to reconcile in my mind that kind of mid-range of 2 to 5 years of experience of people who really are, in my mind, like a level 2, but who think they should already be a level 3. And I don't know how to deal with them at all. Like,
And it's tough because the demand is so high in
Yes.
Utah right
Yes.
now. Because someone else is going to
Yeah.
make that offer.
yeah, I mean, seriously, I probably passed on 3 or 4 people like that,
Yeah.
who in my mind were solid level 2s who were asking for a level 3 salary.
Yeah.
And I had already on my team solid level 3s with level 3 salaries. And I'm like, no, you're a level 2. But they're like, well, I can go make this over there. And it's like,
Go make it over.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of salary things, it really does
Yeah.
come down to the messaging,
Yeah.
to the messaging thing that when you identify, when I was at Intel, we had, it was a simpler matrix, but it was what you're delivering now and what's your acceleration, your velocity. So they call it successful equal velocity to your peers or successful faster velocity of improvement than your peers. So, there was people walking around Intel with shirts that says, I'm a successful equal at Intel, So it was a big joke. But the idea is that the message I want to send to Isaac is you're successful, but you're progressing faster than your peer group, right? And I want to recognize that in some way rather than just always promoting on current status. So, I mean, in that case, we promoted him, and just because we knew that before the next cycle he would be there, and actually before that we gave him some options to say, well, I think your value is going to be really high by the time these options become vested. Sends that message in that. I don't know if that's the right answer. I mean, the truth's still going to be there. He's relatively humble, but I worry about the arrogance factor.
I think it's a gamble, worked out well for that one, but you're kind of, taking that gamble. And I think you need to look at your own organization and what you have, and can you take that gamble? Can you afford the failure of the gamble?
Yeah.
Or the message that it
Yeah.
sends to everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what your worry was, right?
Yeah. So.
Well, that's all the slides I had. But I'll share all these things out in case you want to use them or tweak them or whatever. I do recommend if you use the 9 box, go through each one of the boxes, and I guess you guys already have them. So
I need it.
yeah,
Yeah,
go through it and change them, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing that says this is what has to be in each box. The core thing is I think the best use of it is level around role, and then that's where you can kind of show a peer relation maybe, even. So I haven't used it this way. If someone does, I'd love to hear your feedback. But let's say that your higher potential guys, your velocity guys that are curved higher, they're going to be a column higher than your other ones, right? Or row high.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how it works out.
Could be. Pretty soon, I mean, anytime you start using a model, it'd be nice to have a third dimension. I got to take off. Thank you very much. That's great job, Jeff.
Okay.
That's awesome. Thanks for the
I think
preparation.
we're probably
Okay.
Yeah.
done.
Sorry about that. Sorry for running.
No, thanks
No,
for
it's
coming.
That's it. Anything else anybody wants to talk about? No? All right.